Welcome to the GCI Conference Center. Please. Thank you. Please. You will now be placed into conference. There are 4 participants in the conference.
Ms. Craig, are you online? Mr. Klinkart, are you online?
This is Klinkart, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Is Ms. Craig online?
Yes, we are on. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Wilson, are you online? Okay. Mr. Miller, are you online?
I am.
Mr. Heine, are you online? Mr. Schulte, are you online? Mr. Deshak, are you online? Okay, we'll wait a couple minutes. Well, 3 minutes early anyway.
Hello?
Mr. Schulte, are you online?
My name is Patricia Pfister.
Okay. Mr. Schulte, are you online yet? Mr. Heine, are you online yet? Mr. Deshak, are you online yet? Ms. Wilson, are you online yet? Okay, we'll wait.
Schulte here. Heim is online.
Oh, okay. Ms. Wilson, are you online yet? Mr. Deshak, are you online yet? Ms. Wilson, are you online yet? Mr. Deshak, are you online yet?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Wilson, are you online yet? Ms. Wilson, are you online yet? Ms. Wilson, are you online yet? Okay, there's somebody that may be driving or outside that you can mute your phone. Ms. Wilson, are you online yet?
Am, sir. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you. Okay, so this is Lauren Jones. I'm chair of the Marijuana Control Board. I'd like to call this meeting of Friday, April 7th, 2020 to order at 11:01. Ms. Craig, are we recording?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. We have all board members on the line. We have Executive Director Klinkhardt online, Attorney Joan Wilson online, and Ms. Craig from the staff is online and recording. So that'll be the roll call. Is there any changes to the agenda from any board? Hearing none, that's approved. So last night, the attorney sent out a couple more documents, revisions to the finding of emergency and the emergency regulations. Ms. Wilson, you want to describe what steps you have taken at this point and sort of where we're at in the process for me, please?
I do, Mr. Chair, but I wonder if you saw my request for for executive session for attorney-client privilege advice, just for not very long, 10 minutes.
No, I did not see that. I
just emailed it right before. Yeah.
Oh, usually when I get on the phone, I try not to check my emails. So
That's fine.
Okay. Okay. So, Mr. Klinkhardt, do we use the? Oh, it's here. Okay. All right. So this is not expected. So we will. I will entertain a motion to go into executive session, please.
So moved. Schulte?
Is there a second?
Jaime will second it.
Okay. All right. Are there any objections? Okay. So for those of the public that are on the phone, we are going to disconnect, call into an executive number. And I think Ms. Wilson thought that we would probably be back here in about 10 minutes. Might take 15, but you might get back on the line about 10 minutes, and then we'll be back on as soon as possible. So we will go into executive session. So if the board members would hang up and call back in on the other number. Thank you.
Welcome to the GCI Conference Center. Please enter your access code followed by the pound sign. That entry is not valid. Please enter your access code followed by the pound sign. That entry is not valid. Please enter your access code followed by the pound sign. That entry is not valid. Your call could not be completed. Please try your call again later. The chairperson has disconnected. The conference will now end. Welcome to GCI Conference Center. Please enter your access code followed by the pound. Thank you. Please stand by. You will now be placed into conference. There are 41 participants in the conference.
Two separate documents, one which addresses curbside or drive-up, drive-through delivery, and the other addressing intra-state transportation.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
DeShock, second.
I'll second it.
Okay, Mr. DeShock is seconding it. Is there any discussion from the board? Okay, so on the motion to split the regulations, one into the curbside delivery and the other into the transportation, Mr. DeShaw.
Yes.
Mr. Jaime.
Yes.
Mr. Schulte.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, so to the attorney then, should we look at the finding of emergency first, or should we start looking at the emergency regulations? Which would you prefer?
Why don't you start with the emergency findings, and just know then I will take your recommendations and make a separate emergency findings document for each different set of regulations. As long as you give me direction on how to do that, your vote on this will be sufficient. You won't need to meet again.
Okay. All right, so are there any board member comments or questions related to the finding of emergency that was emailed to us last night?
I guess this is Jaime. I do have a question or a concern with what Ms. Wilson just mentioned. And that's if we are going to separate this into two separate, or this one document's going to turn into two, then do we not need to have two separate votes? Because I'm willing to vote for one in the affirmative and one in the other one, probably not. So that's a question for the chairman.
Yes, there would.
Yes. When we get to the regulations, we will break those off in our discussion and vote separately. On the finding of emergency, I think Ms. Wilson said she would have one for each of the regulations, but we could give her the intent if we had any questions with this, and she would take this finding and split that into two as well.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Schulte.
Yeah, just to sort of echo Mr. Jaime's comment, I think he raises a valid point, because this one document currently addresses the two separate regulatory changes that we're going to consider later. So I could see how, I'm not sure procedurally how we vote on them, because this one document covers both issues.
Okay,
currently.
Ms. Wilson?
So what I would imagine the way we can have this is a motion to amend these emergency findings. One document would strike out the third paragraph, which talks about curbside pickup. The second document would strike out the fourth paragraph, which addresses travel by carriers. I would then adjust the regulations for which you're requesting a suspension request. I divide that accordingly, and then you'd be good to go. So you would be voting on two separate findings, and you'd have to need to get your directions correct, but I have very good people to help me do that.
Oh, Mr. Schulte.
Mr. Chairman, that would satisfy me.
Okay, Mr. Heine. Mr. Schulte?
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. I'm just reading it again, trying to figure out how to properly form a motion.
I'm with you. So before we make any motion, is there any questions or comments about the content that we've been presented here? We've looked at this several times. This is a reformat, but I don't think much of the words have changed.
Looks marvelous.
Okay, then I think Ms. Wilson is correct. We would move a motion to have a finding of emergency that strikes paragraph 3 in the one that we have before us. And we can vote on that, and then we would make another motion to, using the same document, to strike the 4th paragraph. So let's deal with the curbside first. So if somebody could make a motion.
For curbside, you're striking paragraph 4 and the reference to statutes, regulations addressing transport.
Okay, so
Right.
So if we're doing the curbside, we strike paragraph 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, Schulte here.
Yes, Mr. Schultz.
So I would move to consider this current document. Well, do we want to just consider the document and then amend it?
I think the motion would be to split the document, and our first motion would be to accept the finding of emergency with paragraph 4 stricken. And then we can vote on that, and then we can go back and say, taking the same document, we split that, we delete paragraph 4 or 3. I think that would suffice for the motions, and then the attorney knows what our intent is.
Okay, so I move to consider the finding of emergency with the with striking paragraph 4 and lower down the reference to 306, 305, and 306, 310, which I believe would get us a clean document.
It's
Okay.
actually, you want to remove the reference to 306, 750.
Right.
If you,
So this is keeping this is talking about curbside, so we want to eliminate
Yes.
the 750.
I really should
Okay.
have had coffee before we started this. So, yes.
That's why we have the attorney here.
And the reference to 306.
That's why we have the attorney here.
I'm not saying anything more.
Okay, is there a second?
Mr. Jaime, I'll second that.
Okay, so is there a discussion? Is everybody clear? Okay, so hearing no discussion, the motion is to approve the finding of emergency as it was presented to us, striking paragraph 4 and the reference to 3 AAC 306750. Mr. DeShock, your vote, please.
Yes.
Mr. Jaime,
Yes.
Mr. Schulte,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So, next motion, Mr. Schulte?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
sorry to
Ms.
interrupt.
Wilson.
I just wanted to verify that Lieutenant Jaime understood that these emergency findings would approve curbside pickup.
I did not understand that, so I would like to change my vote to no. Thank you, Ms. Wilson, through the chair.
And if anyone else needs to change.
Anybody else want to change their vote besides Mr. Jaime? Okay, so the vote on that motion is 4-1. So the next motion, Mr. Schulte?
Yeah, so I move to adopt the finding of emergency with the omission of paragraph 3, a separate finding of emergency, with the omission of paragraph 3, and then down below the 2 references to 306, AAC 306-305, and AAC 306-310.
Okay, is there a second? Ms. Wilson?
Did I get it right?
I just said excellent. Good job.
Okay.
Oh, thank God.
Is there any discussion or a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Miller. Okay, is there any discussion? So the official of this motion is Mr. Jaime or Mr. DeShock?
Yeah, Mr. Shaw. I was just
Okay.
make sure that we have a complete, clear understanding of the intent of this vote as we get ready to vote, or maybe just re-talk a little bit about the intent on the break of custody as we pass or shoot this down.
Okay, Ms. Wilson, could you address?
Certainly. So this is a vote to find that an emergency exists to support then any changes you would make to the transportation regulation 0.750. In particular, when you get to the regs, what the regs do is permit any licensed marijuana establishment to bring product to a third-party carrier, so long as someone with the marijuana handler permit is carrying that product. And the product goes unattended with that third-party carrier and gets picked up at the point of delivery by the handler of another or maybe the same marijuana establishment. While the product is unattended, the entire transport is detailed in both the the transportation manifest and in metrics. But there is a period of time where no one with a marijuana handler permit is transporting either marijuana or a marijuana product.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we had that clarified. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions?
This is Jaime through the chair. Just a quick question. These are the emergency findings that we're looking at. When we go to the regulations, we can, if necessary, or propose, we can say with delegation so that, let's say, enforcement and the director can have, I don't want to say final say, but if they come up with a policy that is more secure versus breaking the chain of custody with this marijuana, would that be addressed in the regulations or in the findings?
Ms. Wilson?
Mr. Chair, that would be addressed in the regulations, and what you just said, Lieutenant Jaime, that could also be addressed in guidance from the director or from enforcement.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so on the motion to approve a separate finding of emergency, eliminating paragraph 3 and eliminating references to 3 AAC, 306, 305, and 310. On that vote, Mr. DeShock?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Schulte?
Yes.
Mr. Jaime?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, so that motion passes. So we're done with the finding of emergency. The attorney will split those into 2. So we're on to the regulations. So Ms. Wilson, could you tell us which section we need to look at to deal with the transportation first?
Mr. Chair, to deal with transportation first, you need to look at page 3, amendment to 3 AAC 750A, and then page 4, the creation of a new section 3 AAC 305 750H, which which is only on page 4. So page 3 and 4 of the document.
Okay. Mine came as 2 documents, and so that's at the bottom of page 1 and the top of page 2 on mine, but that's okay. So basically, is there any questions related to 3 AAC 750A is amended to read, and followed by 3 AAC 305 750H is amended by adding a new section to read? Is there any discussion or questions from the board?
I have one question under H2.
Mr. Miller.
Right now, that section talks about the pickup and how long a marijuana handler card would have to go to receive that pickup, and it's kind of a / with a blank for hours, and I think we need to have a discussion about that and fill in the blank.
Okay, do you have any suggestions?
The only suggestion I have is, immediately. I don't have a number of hours. If the aircraft is supposed to arrive at 3, then you should be there at 3 to pick it up. So I don't think it should linger, I guess is what I would say.
So your suggestion would be,
Miller.
so your suggestion would be after the word airport transport carrier, strike no later than blank hours and just add immediately after the marijuana or marijuana product is available for pickup?
Yes. I like that.
I would second that. If that's your motion, I'll second it.
Oh, Mr. Miller would have to make the motion, but...
So motion, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I thought we had questions, so...
Right, okay. Ms. Wilson, do you understand that?
Fully. I've already made the change.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. But
no, I totally understand.
We are being
so on that
super
motion
efficient.
Now, this is Mr. Chuck, but if we go to immediately, if we put that in there, that seems a little bit strict with just the normal functioning of life. I mean, there's going to be some sort of, it's not going to be, nobody's perfect.
Excuse me, Mr. DeShock. Somebody unmuted their phone and they're either outside or driving. If they can mute their phone, please. It's causing a lot of static for us. Thank you. Mr. DeShock, could you repeat what you were saying?
Yeah, I'm just a little bit concerned with the immediately, that exact language. The product may arrive, it still needs to be processed by the carrier. The carrier may not have somebody available immediately to co-sign that to whoever's picking it up. So that seems like a little bit strict. I mean, you want it to be as immediately as possible, but I think that what would happen if you're 10 minutes late or you're an hour late, now it's, then it just keeps on shifting and slipping.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Schulte.
Having seconded Mr. Miller's thought, I totally agree with Mr. DeShock. Perhaps it'd be more appropriate to say as soon as possible after, as soon as possible, as soon as practical, as soon as possible after the marijuana or marijuana product is available for pickup. That might be a more...
Ms. Wilson, do you have a more word of art?
That's a squishy... how about promptly?
Same thing.
That's squishy too.
Through the chair. Yeah. Through the chair,
Mr. Jaime.
I have to agree with Mr. Miller. When you say immediately, this is these are professionals, they're business owners, they're responsible people. If a plane is coming in, they should be at the airport. Now, are we talking about them not showing up, or are we talking about the process of the airlines removing it from the plane and getting it to the permit holder or the licensee or whatever?
In
I
the
think
latter,
immediately is the correct terminology.
in the latter case, Lieutenant, it's only once the product is available for pickup. So any delay on the carrier's part would not be held against the person receiving the property.
And that's my understanding of it as well. That's why I believe the word immediately is the proper word.
Okay. Any other discussion? Is there any amendment to change the word immediately?
Mr. Chair, this is Mr. Shock. I don't have anything to put in there to amend it, and so what I would say is, thinking of the or marijuana product is available for pickup, product from the commercial, marine, or air transport carrier no later than blank hours after the marijuana or marijuana product is available for pickup. I suppose in this situation that immediately may be an acceptable word from. I think maybe I can buy into that. I just don't want it to get into a point where, you know, you have a regulation that it's impossible to follow. But I'm swayed a little bit by Mr. Jaime there.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, so on the vote to amend 3 AAC 305-750H2 to remove the words no later than _hours and replace that with the word immediately. Mr. DeShock, your vote.
Yes.
Mr. Jaime.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Schulte. Mr. Schulte?
Sorry, yes.
And I'm yes. Okay, so are there any other questions on those two sections dealing with transportation?
Through the chair, this is Jaime.
Mr. Jaime?
The only other question, we brought this up a minute ago in the findings, and it comes to the chain of custody of the marijuana. So, can we address that now?
Yes.
If that's the case, then I'd like to make an amendment to the original motion to add with delegation, because the chain of custody is an issue that's going to have to be looked at from numerous eyes, not just the board, but through enforcement and the director's office. So I'd like to add delegation so that, and they can present it back to the board once they come up with the proper language, but there has to be something there that says, you know, an explanation of why there's breaking custody or chain of custody and how that's going to be addressed. Because there are issues with, you know, luggage being misplaced, disappearing, and that puts a lot of work on the enforcement. So I'd like to make a motion to amend to add with delegation.
Okay. One, I don't think we have a motion yet to accept these, so, but the question about delegation, Ms. Wilson, I think it was your intent and our intent to get these ready to be adopted if the governor says go ahead. Mr. Jaime's motion to delegate so that there's some review by the board and then brought back to us delays that process. Is that not correct?
That is correct, unless after you make a vote on these regulations, you can delegate or direct the director to consider any policy implications of this break in chain of custody and come back to the board within some period of time with ways to fix it.
Okay. Mr. Jaime, would that be okay with you?
Through the chair, yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So is there any other discussion on 3AAC 750A or 3AAC 305 750H as now amended? Okay, is there a motion to approve those two regulation changes?
So moved. Schulte?
Okay. And Mr. Schulte, would you add to your motion that the staff should review the implications of the chain of custody, and if there's policy issues that they need to bring those back to the board at our next meeting?
Absolutely, and I won't even attempt to rephrase it because that was very well put.
Okay. All right, is there a second? Ms. Wilson?
With those conditions, I will second it.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
say or sooner if something major comes up, you should hold a emergency meeting to address enforcement's concern.
Okay. Is that okay with you, Mr. Schulte?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we've had our discussion. Hopefully Ms. Craig can reconstruct the motion correctly, but I believe the motion is to approve 3AAC 750A and 3AAC 305 750H as amended, and that staff is to look at policy implications on the chain of custody, and if there are implications, to report those back to the board as soon as necessary. So with that understanding, the vote, Mr. DeShock.
Yes.
Mr. Jaime.
Yes.
Mr. Schulte.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, so then is there anything in 306, 305A that needs to get changed due to the transportation change? And is there anything in 310A that needs to get changed due to the transportation change? Or anything in 306-995 that needs to be changed because of the transportation change? Okay, hearing none, then on the split motion that we had voted on, so we have basically taken care of transportation. That's the one split. So now we're on to the curbside. So that would be 306, 305A and 306, 310A and 306, 995. So are there any questions, concerns on any of those sections that we could address to the attorney or ourselves?
Through the chair, this is Jaime.
Mr. Jaime.
So we've had several discussions on this regulation change, and I just have to reiterate one more time. It's like that old saying from Winston Churchill: "Never let a good crisis go to waste." And unfortunately, I think that's what is happening with this regulation. I don't think these changes are necessary at this time. We're opening a box. We're opening the door for the future to allow this permanently. And I don't care what's said. That's the way I see it. I disagree with curbside deliveries when it comes to marijuana. I just can't in good conscience for the motoring public safety, public health. I cannot agree to this regulation change at all. So thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments or concerns?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Schulte.
Yeah, I'm probably going to vote in favor of this, but I don't disagree with Mr. Jaime's comment. And as I was reading through this this morning, I was wondering and I'm just thinking out loud here, I was wondering, perhaps there's an opportunity here for these retailers to, provide the customer with, some sort of reminder, the going beyond the mandated disclaimers, something saying like, hey, consuming while you're driving is still illegal, for whatever effect it'll have, because I think it's a valid concern, and we don't want people, coming in, buying product and then driving down the street, consuming it. Just a thought.
I appreciate that. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chair? Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Holscher.
I'm sorry, if the chairman would permit me, I just would like to reiterate what I stated previously, that I don't believe that this, you got to weigh the safety of exposure to COVID-19 versus re-exposing people to other aspects of public safety. So I just want to reiterate that enforcement is against us.
Okay. Ms. Wilson.
I neglected to answer a question that Lieutenant Jaime had asked me about how long these regulations stay in effect. And the answer I've received is, rather than, alter the 120 days set out for emergency regulations, should the disaster end sooner, the board can hold another meeting to withdraw these regulations immediately. We would handle that as another emergency regulation project. And just so you're aware, the alcohol board had the same concerns about people wanting to make this permanent, their approved curbside delivery or pickup. And, it was reiterated to them that these are 120-day regulations, and that there was not the will to do that. I'm not saying the will of your board will change, but the licensees were certainly informed that the accommodation was to respond to the emergency, not to make business easier for folks.
Okay. And being on the assembly, we were sent a copy of the regulations, and it does have an expiration date of August 13th. I assume that is 120 days from Wednesday.
You would have to ask Jane Sawyer. She's so good at that, but I'm assuming so.
Okay. I was trying to figure that out, and it sort of made sense with 31 days in May, 30 days in June, 31 in July. That got it up to like 92, and then you figure April and that part of August, but I didn't do it directly, but it sounded like that was. So we would probably have an opportunity to review this before that if they declared the emergency done. If we're still in an emergency, we'll be meeting for our June meeting by phone. Otherwise, we'll be in person, and I think that will definitely be a time when we could address these.
I do have one more question.
Mr. Hyman.
When it comes to the emergency, that's a pretty vague term. Are we going to tie this regulation into a specific health mandate? Because I can see some of these mandates, such as maybe social distancing or travel, extending longer than others. So the emergency itself, it could go on for years for all we know. I've seen projections of 2022 with emergencies still being in place where certain mandates might continue on. So are these regulation changes going to pertain to a specific health mandate? And if so, which one?
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Wilson.
Under the emergency findings, the transportation mandate is pinned to the small community mandate and the interstate travel mandate. And this one would be pinned to the social distancing mandate. I have to think of which one that is, 4 or 5. But even if the emergency goes on forever, these regulations only go on for 120 days, unless you make
Okay, thank you very much.
And we, Mr. Jaime, we on the Assembly are having the exact same discussion. Alaska Municipal League, the idea of when businesses might start to reopen, or which ones would reopen, what phases, what are the metrics by which you decide that you don't have a spike and so you can go a little farther, or there is a spike so you have to shut back down. I know the governor's office is looking at that, but we as the assembly are looking at that. And if the governor was to restart businesses and we felt differently, how would we address that with our own mandates? And if we had separate metrics for our community versus another community that might be doing really well, what are our thoughts? And so we're dealing with something none of us have ever dealt with before. And certainly 8 years on the assembly, I've never had to deal with the fact that we as the assembly might want to go stronger than the governor or weaker than the governor, depending on which way you go. So, but just knowing that these last 120 days, and we can address these at a called meeting at any time.
No, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm glad it's in the conversation. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
So, yes, Mr. DeShuck.
Well, I just wanted to make sure, like the U.S. Farm Bill is probably like 90 years past its sunset on its emergency. But I think that some of these things can go, especially if we start asking industry to, expand their licensing, their premise, expanding their camera coverage, all of these different things. And so my biggest concern is just making sure that this even makes sense as something to do. For, why, and Mr. Miller has already made it clear kind of where it can benefit the stores, but my biggest problem with this is to see how this changes business whatsoever. I mean, I understand that there's problems, but there's businesses all over the state that are struggling with it, and we're able to do it. So that's my hang up.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
This is Mr. Miller. I would just like to make one comment.
Sure, Mr. Miller.
I do take everything that Mr. Jaime says very seriously, and I like to consider it. But with the curbside delivery, I don't believe that we're going to increase public risk whether we're handing a purchased cannabis product to someone over the counter or we hand it to them through the window. I can't correlate how that becomes more dangerous because apparently we think they're going to consume it while they're driving. It's really the same consumer that would have come into the store that's sitting in the car. So I just, wanted to make that comment. I can't correlate the danger. On the phone, right? Yeah. Sorry.
Excuse me, Mr. Miller. There's somebody on the telephone that's having a conversation. Could you please mute your phone? Please mute your phone, please. Mr. Miller, are you done?
I am.
Okay, Mr. Schulte.
Yeah, just one comment. I was perhaps erroneous focusing on the issue of driving impaired, which is a significant concern. But I do recall in previous conversations, there was discussion about exposing employees to potential criminal activity, on the premises, and I get that. I don't dismiss that, and I think it's incumbent on retailers who are, if we approve this, and if a retailer decides to adopt this method of retail transaction on a temporary basis, then they're going to need to give very, very careful consideration to keeping their employees safe when they are outside the building.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I would just comment and echo Mr. Schulte. I think the industry supporting this, but I think individual persons in the industry are going to have to think hard and long about whether they institute this. what that means for their employees, what it might mean for extra costs at a time when they are still open and operating, when a lot of bars and restaurants are not. So I think the proof will be in the pudding when we get to understanding from staff how many changes in operating procedures are being requested and exactly what people are doing. But if people are going to invest a lot of money to open up a wall and put in a window, I think they need to think long and hard about making that investment and whether that will be a short-term investment. So, but again, that's a business is going to have to make their business decision based on the current way they can operate. So, okay. So that being said,
Mr. Jones?
do I have a yes, Mr. Miller?
Somehow I got kicked off the conference, so I lost the last 2 minutes of that conversation, if there was anything important.
No, it's just me talking, and that's not important.
Agreed. All right, sorry.
Okay, so I think we're at the point now with our discussion that I need a motion to approve 3 AAC 306 305A, 3 AAC 306 310A, and 3 AAC 306 995.
So moved. Schulte.
Mr. Schulte. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve those 3 sections of the regulations. That will be a separate regulations once redrafted by the attorney. So on that motion, Mr. DeShock.
No.
Mr. Jaime.
No.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Schulte.
Yes.
And I will be a yes on this one with some caveats, but I think we need to give it a shot. So, okay. So I think we have completed our business on those 2 items. Is there anything else that the board wants to talk about, either about this regulation or concerns or things that staff should consider besides what was part of the motion on the transportation and the policy around chain of custody?
Mr. Chairman? Schulte?
Mr. Schulte.
Yeah, just a quick closing comment, if I may. I mean, obviously,
Sure.
Thanks to Ms. Wilson for all of her work. I know she's been scrambling to get this stuff perfected and before us, so I really appreciate that. And staff, as always, they're doing an awesome job. One comment I'd like to make to the folks listening, because I know there are, if you have one of these businesses that's so affected, please just take to heart these comments. I mean, we don't even know if the governor's office is going to approve both of these proposed regulations changes, but if they do, it's really, really super important that everybody recognize that how sensitive certainly the curbside delivery option is, even in the short term. And please do whatever you can to protect your staff, and don't bring any negative light to what we've done here, because we're trying to help you out. So help us help you, and good luck.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, so we do have a spot here for public testimony on
Actually,
non-agenda.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Wilson.
I have 2
Yes,
comments.
Ms. Wilson.
Online. The first is I was asked to address whether handling the extension of marijuana handler permits is appropriate in this. I started thinking about it, and because these are emergency regulations and they're only good for 120 days, this is not the right forum. But perhaps you could direct staff to open a regulations project, and I'll determine whether we need some version of a permanent regulation for this year on that. And secondly, I was asked to explain the next step in the process. What happens is these documents are broken into 2. Ms. Sawyer and Ms. Craig assist me in making a record Because we're waiting for the governor's approval, I would not immediately submit these to the lieutenant governor for adoption. I'd like to give the governor some time to consider both of these matters. But assuming approval, we got approval of the adoption of the alcohol emergency regulations in less than 24 hours. So I would expect that to move quickly. If these are not approved, you may consider an emergency. You might want to consider setting another meeting to address what the board would like to do about that. But I leave that for your consideration.
Okay. So is there a motion on the handler's card suggestion that the attorney just made?
So motioned.
Mr. Miller. Is there a second?
Second.
Shock, second.
Okay. Is there any discussion, comment?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Mr. Shock.
Yes, Mr. DeShock.
For the marijuana handler card, I had thought that a couple of meetings ago, maybe we didn't tie up the loose ends on this. I thought that we had moved to extend those, and I was just wondering whether or not it seems like through this that maybe we could just delegate to the staff. To me, it seems like in the computer, perhaps we would be able to just add 12 months or add whatever dates, and then send an email out to everybody with their updated cards. I mean, it seems like that should be something that we can just kind of click go on, and everybody's are automatically extended.
Okay. I think that's what we did, basically. I think there's been some questions, and Ms. Wilson just thought that if we would open up a regulation process, then we could see what the implications are, since the regulations emergency should only go 120 days, and we sort of made this thing for a year as a policy change, but we still have the regulations that say they expire, every 3 years. So I think what Ms. Wilson's trying to do is keep us out of some legal trouble, and if staff and her look at the regulations, then if they feel that what we have done in our change of administration policy went too far, that this would be a suggested fix to what we did. Am I paraphrasing that correctly, Ms. Wilson?
That's completely accurate. And should we need to amend regulations, we could do a 30-day public comment period and get something in place. Maybe not by your June meeting, but by your next meeting, if that's September.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments on the motion to have staff open up a regulations project and take a look at the handler permits? Is there any objection to that?
Nope.
Okay, no objection then. We will ask staff to do that and report back to us whenever they have something to tell us. As far as coming up with another meeting, I think we'll just wait to see what the governor's office does, and then we'll have Mr. Klinkhardt maybe poll the members whether they want to have another meeting. Is that okay with everybody?
Works for me.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Shaw.
Yeah, Mr. DeShock.
Yeah, just to add one thing to the staff, if we were going to open up a marijuana handler card regulation, maybe if they could attach or take a look at the turnover of marijuana card handlers, how many of the percentage that are renewed, and then the total fees paid per year.
Okay. I will add that to their delegation. I'm sure Mr. Klinkhardt heard that.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay. Any further comments? Okay, so we do have on here a time for public testimony to issues not on the agenda or not proposed regulations. Is there anybody listening that would like to address the Marijuana Control Board on issues not on our agenda nor related to regulations?
I would.
And who is this?
My name is Patricia Pfister, and
Okay,
I
Ms.
hold
Pfister.
the permit. And I hold the permit for the ACP LLC. It's a standard marijuana cultivation facility. This has to do with COVID-19. May 31st, I will be 79 years old. I'm in great health, but you never know what's going on right now. And if something should happen to me, how do I, like in a will, can I pass this permit on to somebody? How would that work?
I will ask staff to contact you directly. We have, I want to say 2 years ago, maybe 3, we had a licensee pass away. We had that discussion, and I can't remember what the administrative fix was, but I'm sure staff that was there, maybe even Mr. Holscher would understand. And I will ask them to contact you off this meeting and have that discussion with you. My wife turned 74 today. I was 74 2 weeks ago, so I can really appreciate what you are contemplating, or hopefully not, and hopefully we have the same conversation a couple of years from now.
Okay, terrific.
Okay,
I appreciate
thank you.
it.
You bet. Is there anybody else online that would like to address the board on non-agenda items? Okay, hearing none. I just want to. There's somebody trying to get online.
Yeah, this is Kirby Coleman here. I just wanted to thank you guys for your time and your efforts in order to hash this all out. I know it hasn't been the easiest meetings and emergencies and working around everyone's schedules, but appreciate all your guys' time and effort in doing so. And that's it. And thank you for staff and Jane and Sarah and everyone that's worked on all this. So it's important to us. So appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so with that, I just want to say I appreciate the staff and the board. It's been a real series of quick meetings. It's not how I wanted to start my chairmanship, but I think we've done some good work, and we've done it over the phone, and I really appreciate those who are listening in, because we haven't had the interruptions and that we've had in the past, and it's made our work a lot easier, especially to the staff and Ms. Wilson for plowing through all of this. And if there's no other comments, then I will call this meeting adjourned at 12:08 p.m. And wish you all a good day. Thanks. Goodbye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The chairperson has disconnected. The conference will now end.